Right. So let's now move from capitalism to communism.
Oh, nice.
It's interesting.
Good advice.
These press briefings are getting very foundational.
I
So
know he's really like it is. You're right. But how often do you ever hear like, what's your ideological stance on like economic systems? Oh, I wish they did that with Trump.
communism now don't like it. Never
Some
get
people
good.
they say that communism is very bad, but sometimes they say that it's good, and sometimes they say I'm a communist. And
Look, I'm a communist for the people. So here's Jen Psaki talking about Cuba. Then we'll get to someone much more interesting to hear talk about Cuba after this.
Investments in making sure we're addressing our climate crisis. He will leave the mechanics and the timeline up to Leader Schumer. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jen. Now that you've had a few days to think about it, does this White House still think the protests in Cuba are happening because people are upset?
So that little shithead is Steve Doocy of Fox News's Fox and Friends' son. Peter Doocy, I believe is his name, or who it gives a fuck what his first name is. But that's, that just to give a sense of who that is.
About a rise in COVID cases there, or is there some thought maybe given to the possibility that they are protesting because they are sick of communism?
Well, Peter, first I would say communism is a failed ideology, and we certainly believe that. It has failed the people of Cuba. They deserve freedom. They deserve a government that supports them, whether that is making sure they have health and medical supplies, access to vaccines, or whether they have economic opportunity and prosperity. And instead, this has been a government, an authoritarian communist regime that has repressed its people and has failed the people of Cuba. Hence, we're seeing them in the streets. But I would note that the ideology of the government, which has failed, has led to a fail.
Yeah, okay, that's good enough.
it's all coded. It's all coded. These bloodsuckers out there, these capitalist bloodsuckers out there, they're going to sit here and they're going to tell you that it is communism that's failing the people of Cuba, when it is the American blockade that is preventing the people from getting access to the vaccines. Absolute ghouls.
It's like I don't know. Again, like I guess this would be a little on-brand metaphor, but pheasant hunting or duck hunting, when the birds, get up in front, you kind of flush them. If you want to do that in any conversation between like a Jen Psaki and a Peter Doocy about Cuban communism, just say embargo. Like right? Like that, it's like the specter haunting all these conversations. Like why? Like that's, and you know what? It is a good. It's a good sign that these protests that became an almost impossible to suppress, rejoinder, which is the embargo. Of course, you fucking mentioning medical supplies, right? And that's why I think I think Austin was on a few weeks ago talking about like how inspirational AOC is, but that's why it's important AOC doesn't limit like a moment like that, because like that's a huge moment, and that thing happening, it's just like with I mentioned this, like it should have just been like Palestine and Gaza, and you're going to de-emphasize the Hamas rockets for the reason we all know why you de-emphasize that, right? And so like I just wanted to make that point.
No, you're 100% right. And beyond that, I mean, the amount of insane propaganda that was at play, both coming directly from the White House and from mainstream media, from the use of like photographs of Miami, or even some Mexican publications putting out pictures of Cairo, right? To one of the favorite images that folks have been using to try to use this kind of, I don't know, like woke wash the protests, right? Of that younger woman, black woman in Cuba, and they've been using that as like the photograph of the resistance. That was a person at a pro-government rally in support of the Cuban Revolution and the Cuban system, and that was just being propagated in the United States without any context to try to promote it as an image of somebody fighting for the complete opposite thing, right? So along from like the kind of general structural points of like the embargo and the fact that if people are upset about not getting medical equipment, there's a big reason for that.
It's not communism. Well, I mean, it is communism in a roundabout kind of way.
Yeah. Well, it also should be noted too that it's not just the embargo. Like the United States hoards insane amount of medical equipment from other countries as well. The United States buys up massive amounts of supply and then doles it out as it sees fit, right? But that's, that is certainly here and there. But but that's just a secondary point, right?
Well,
So
let me jump in just real quick there on the like we're looking at Iran is facing its fifth COVID wave, right? And I mean it's and another like point that on the sort of drum we're trying to beat here to not make this about the culture war is we're seeing new variations of COVID, not because Fox News rubes aren't getting vaccinated, because it's because we're just have a complete vaccine apartheid. That's the word that needs if we're like that's what's going on right now, and it's not even not that it should be defensible if you're saying, well, if you're self-interested, well, I like this vaccine apartheid. It's foolish. It's absolutely and murderous on a mass level that we're not vaccinating these other countries, because that's where these new variations are really coming from. It's not coming from Missouri. I mean, statistically, this is what an epidemiologist had said earlier this week.
And it can't be stated enough that specifically in the Cuban case, they had the wisdom to recognize that the United States was very willing to let the rest of the world suffer. So they developed their own. And when we're talking about the struggles with vaccinating folks, it's not through technological ability. We're talking raw resources, which is fundamental to the embargo. And
they would love to create the impression it is about like technical know-how.
They don't understand. They just don't understand how to do it. It's like, no, they know how to do it. You just have all the shit that is needed to make it happen. It's just, I agree. And I do think it's worth pointing out what happened with AOC regarding that, because in a context where you're seeing Democrats even start to waver on like the righteousness of the blockade, right? Obviously I don't think the blockade is righteous, but they believe that it was right. You're starting to see some breaking of ranks in that. And for the supposed Democratic Socialist representative, right, to not really be at the forefront of demanding a more robust solution. Hell, just go back to the damn Obama policy towards Cuba. It's truly insulting, especially for somebody who's supposed to be a member of a political organization. And this is a whole other conversation regarding AOC, a political organization that has voted and has decided its policy on Cuba, which is support for the Cuban people and the Cuban government, right? If you want to float this as part of your credentials of being a part of the left, I'm talking about AOC, and you're not even able to stand in line with the kind of directives and decisions of the organization that you're a part of, it shows some real structural issues. And sorry, Matt, I want to get this because there is this kind of like fixation that we have from all these people. I guess I would call them the kind of unorganized left, right? The people who like think that, oh well, this is proof that like AOC is like controlled opposition, or she's this or that, and that's like, no, this is a person who was a member of an organization that was able to propel her into a pretty high position, and did not have the structures in place to be able to control people like AOC. AOC effectively has a lot more power than this socialist organization does. Well, right?
And I just wanted to put in there, like, she didn't run just as a DSA candidate. She also ran as like a Justice Dem too, right? Like, so, and I think that's the thing is like, I think particularly a message to AOC defenders in this case is that you have to understand, like, when the ways are parted, then you have to be able to delineate and elaborate what is happening. Like, and so if she's going to go on this other jaunt and to like fish in different waters, it has to be clear that what she's doing, and hopefully that works out for her and we can meet up somewhere else down the line with like the projects. But it's like that it's a problem, right? Because that, the reason it's frustrating is because we know that they can do better, because they figured it out with Hamas, right? Like that's the same trap. It's the same emphasis sort of trap that they're falling into.
Exactly. And it's like, and this is why a lot of the conversations regarding AOC and I guess the squad in general are very exhausting, because like, here's like our position, or at least my position, right, is that the fundamental task of the left right now is to build strong, organized, working class organizations that not only can operate in the electoral field, but also can be used as avenues to flex working class power. Again, not just as a voting bloc, but also our power in the workplace, right? That's the big time goal, what we need to be doing, right? And all of these things that are happening along the way are attempts at doing that. And what we've seen with AOC is a lot of beneficial stuff. I mean, she's still, people always call me a big time AOC defender on Twitter, which is funny because I actually don't think I ever say too much nice things about her, except for maybe when like Austin was on recently and he made the point, which was correct, that for our friends in Moss and then our friends in South America, they see her as an extremely positive development, right? And I do think taking that perspective is worthwhile. But as to what her relationship is with these new organizations that we have, it's extremely distant. And I don't understand people's inability to sort of grasp that. She can still be extremely useful, and she can be used a hell of a lot better than she has been, and she can do a hell of a lot more, right? But to sit here and be like, okay, well, AOC, who sometime years and years ago was somewhat active or at least present in an organization, and now has propelled herself into a completely different situation where she doesn't even pick up people's phone calls anymore. And now we're going to put everything that she does or says on this whole group of like 100,000 plus people fighting for a different world is absurd to me. And I think the reason that they sort of dig in this, I don't want to get into the Twitter nonsense, but the reason that there is this sort of hilarious thing about people accusing her of owning the bar that she worked at, sort of shows though that there's a lot of digging, in places where there's nothing at the bottom, right? When there are like very legitimate things to criticize her for, and honestly, the Cuba stuff, that's life or death stuff. And it's not a kind of like, extra criticism. Like, this is a serious criticism. There's a lot of criticisms about things that she does when it comes to advocating for working people in Congress, and strategic moves about her relationship with Nancy Pelosi and the Democratic Party in general, right? There's a lot of criticisms about her, but this kind of fixation to criticize her and be like, oh, well, she must be like an operative, or she has some secret motivations. Like, this is somebody who got propelled, who has politics that I would say are some kind of weird combination of vulgar socialism, in the sense that like, I support working people, with a kind of just general squishy progressiveness, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a hell of a lot better than the vast majority of Democrats, but it's nowhere near close to sufficient, which is why I don't spend a lot of time talking about her, thinking about her, because I don't see this as like, oh, this is the engine, or this is the vehicle that we're going to use to build socialism. We're already having to build something completely different, because almost immediately we recognize the severe limitations of what that was going to be, and AOC in Congress, essentially.
Yeah, it's like we're not going to win without those sorts of people, but we're also not going to win with them leading the way, right?